Ruby. For over 1,000 years, the only rubies that mattered came from a single valley in Burma called Mogok. Burmese kings believed deeply that rubies made them untouchable in battle, and warriors had them inserted directly under the skin before combat. They ended up conquering a big part of Southeast Asia, so it probably worked. The stone was like a kind of armor. When the British Empire seized the Mogok mines in 1885, it wasn't a territorial dispute. The ruby trade was directly funding the armed resistance against British expansion, and London knew it. A gemstone triggered a colonial military operation. Today, the Mogok Valley is still producing, still under military-controlled access, and a top-grade ruby from that specific valley sells for more per carat than any diamond on Earth. The British took the mines, but not the value nor the reputation. Vanadinite. For most of human history, the vivid red-orange pigment used in painting, manuscript illustration, and cosmetics across the ancient world came from minerals containing lead. The Romans used it on walls, on faces, and on ceramic glazes without any knowledge of the toxicity. Painters in medieval Europe ground the same compounds into powder daily, breathing the dust, touching their brushes to their lips to maintain a fine tip. The brilliant red that appears in illuminated manuscripts and Renaissance paintings came at a direct biological cost to the people who made them. Vanadinite sits in that same family of visually extraordinary lead minerals. It grows as perfect hollow hexagonal crystals in vivid red-orange clusters that look more architectural than natural. In hand, it is denser than it appears, heavy with lead content, fragile enough to break under pressure. The most visually theatrical mineral in the red spectrum is probably one of the most quietly dangerous objects a collector can put on a shelf. Pyrope garnet. Before diamonds dominated European jewelry, pyrope garnet did. Deposits in what is now the Czech Republic supplied the entire continent for centuries, and at the peak of the Bohemian garnet industry in the 18th and 19th centuries, tens of thousands of people worked in a regional economy built exclusively around cutting and setting these stones. The Habsburg Imperial Collection contained pyrope garnets the size of thumbnails, in pieces still considered among the finest jewelry ever produced in Europe. Most of the royalty wore them all the time, and the church commissioned them. Military decorations were set with them. Under candlelight, the color deepens into something closer to burning coal than conventional red, which is exactly why Victorian mourning jewelry adopted it so heavily a century later. A stone that appeared lit from within was appropriate for grief and for memory. The same stone the Habsburgs wore as a symbol of imperial power was repurposed as a symbol of loss. Two completely opposite emotional registers, but the same stone, separated by 100 years of history. Rubellite. Empress Dowager Cixi ruled China for 47 years and was arguably the most powerful woman in Asian history. She also had an obsession, not with jade, which was the traditional imperial stone, with rubellite, the deep red variety of tourmaline being mined out of a mountain in San Diego, California. She bought it in such quantities that the Himalaya mine in San Diego existed almost entirely to supply her personal collection. American miners on one side of the world were financially dependent on the taste of a single woman in the Forbidden City. She was buried with it. When her tomb was looted in 1928 by a Chinese military general, significant quantities of rubellite were found distributed around her body. She wanted the stone in life and arranged to take it into death. When Cixi died in 1908 and the Qing dynasty began its collapse, the imperial order stopped. The Himalaya mine lost its primary market almost overnight and went bankrupt shortly after. A mine in California was closed by the death of an empress in Beijing. The stone that built and then destroyed that economy today sells at a fraction of ruby prices, visually indistinguishable from it without instruments. We'll never know what Cixi knew. Fire opal. The Aztecs called fire opal Quetzalcoatlitli Yolitli, the stone of the bird of paradise. It was among the most sacred materials in Mesoamerican culture, mined from volcanic deposits in what is now the Mexican state of Querétaro, and traded across the entire continent long before European contact. Spanish conquistadors who encountered it in the 16th century described the stone that appeared to hold fire inside it, transparent enough to see through, but burning with an internal orange and and red that no other material produced. They brought specimens back to Europe, where the stone generated significant fascination and then largely disappeared from the Western market for 2 centuries, overshadowed by the opaque Australian opals that dominated the trade. Fire opal is the only variety of opal that is transparent to semi-transparent, and the only one where the color comes from the body of the stone, rather than the internal light diffraction that makes other opals shimmer. In direct light, it glows from the inside outward, orange deepening to red at the center, with a warmth that has a quality closer to liquid than mineral. The finest specimens still come from Mexico, from the same volcanic region the Aztecs mined 500 years ago. The stone that was sacred to one of the most powerful civilizations in the Americas is today sold in silver settings at tourist markets a few kilometers from its source.